Hello, I wanted to make a tutorial to fix an issue that I ended up having when trying to make a character with inhuman bones, in this case like ears and tail for a character in VRChat. I wanted to show the fix that I was able to find, which took a lot of time, and it's kind of stupid, but either way. So, like, as a quick thing, before I try going into a long one, which I might link in the description, the quick thing was, even though they recommend doing it in the gesture layer, I had to do it in the FX layer. No other layer would work, not even the action layer. So I had to stick it in the FX layer. So I put the tail in and the ears in. You got to make sure that the weight is up, which is important here because it might work in Unity with the weight off, but VRChat it will not work if the weight is not up. And then on top of that, I have two layers individually in FX, one for only controlling the tail. All the tail movements are in here. I don't have any other tail movements in any other layer or any other thing. And then same thing for the ears. And this is because this was the only way I could figure out to not cause conflicts where one would cause the tail to be doing something when it shouldn't. That was the way that I was able to do it. And that was, again, that was my main fix for being able to get things like the tail to work. As an example to show it, I have whatever the thing is that allows me to try it while in Unity. So here the mouth's open, but it's closed to VRChat. But I can do things such as activate the tail wag, which, as you can see here, is the animator, which is in the FX layer. It works. And I also have a custom emote. It's slightly off in the timing, but as you can see, both the ears and tail moved, and both of them are active in the FX layer for their corresponding part. This one also has a part in the action layer for controlling all the humanoid bones, but that's because, again, I'm not using the FX layer to control the humanoid bones. I'm using it to control the inhuman bones, which in this case is the tail and ears, because that's what Unity considers inhuman in this case. By the way, so I think that's the basics for the fix that I ended up using. Essentially, FX layer, make sure it's weighted. For me, I also masked them to ensure that they're not going to be controlling anything else. And now I'm going to get into a little bit more of a detailed thing for if you wanted to try and do this from scratch or on a model that doesn't have anything set up too much yet. So in short, if you wanted to set something up layer-wise, so what you'd have to do is you'd have all this, you'd add a layer like this, clicking the plus. I'm in the FX one. You'd add it, you'd name it, and then you could drag an animation or create one and then select one from in here, which could be anything, like one of the tail wags that I made. And then you can name it if you want, and this goes to it by default. Obviously, you'd have to probably watch a tutorial on how to set these up or just figure it out through tinkering. If you wanted a more in-depth of how these diagrams work, it's mostly just a transition thing. You can also use the examples that VRChat comes with in the VRC SDK, examples 3, animation, controllers. There's a bunch of examples. Got to make sure that you have them. Another important thing is make sure you've got the layers equipped. So the animation layers that I have that I actually use is the action, the FX, and the gesture. I do not currently use these, but I plan on adding them to my model layer, which is why I have a version of them here, which these are just duplicates from the examples that I'm going to edit. And if you wanted to try making like the tail thing from scratch, mine's a little difficult because of the setup, but to show an example, the recommendation that I saw in the tutorial is to use Control D while selecting your model that you've got used. Go to your original, hit this checkbox so it doesn't actually load it in the scene. Go to your duplicate, and the reason why we do this is that I made an animation controller, which you can just do by going to create. If you have everything in here, animation controller, and then make one. Doesn't matter what's in it, you just have to have one. Technically it might make one for you, but I just do this so it doesn't make them in random parts. And then you need a animation thing, which you can do by going to Window, animation or hitting Control 6. This one's already showing an animation for some reason. I guess it's because I've already shown one, but I'd want to make a new one. And one way for me to do that is I could just go, I have a folder for animations, create animation, and then I'd name it something like, I'm gonna call this one tutorial. And then while selecting this one, it then goes to the animation thing. I have the model selected, so this is the model that I'm going for. Why is it going automatically back to the tail? Why you do this? I don't know why it's going to that one. Project. And it won't let me add it because I need to drag a model. Drag a model? No. It's being dumb. Hold on. I might have to cut this out. Blah, blah, blah. Because when I select this, and then immediately goes here, edit the curves, preview. Don't want to preview it. Create new clip. Oh, there we go. Apparently, for some reason, I have an animation pre-attached. So either way, I'm going to show an example. For me, my tailbone is part of the armature. So I go armature, go past the root, past the pelvis, and the first part is my tail. I don't mess with any part of it except the rotation. So I open up the transform, go to rotation, and hit plus. Now the rotation is in there. And what I can do, I believe this is like a second or something. So one thing I could do is I'm going to select this. For reasons, I'm going to be on pivot and global, I think, is what I'm going to use. And then while it's selected, I'm going to hit this so it goes into the mode to record it. I'm going to drag it using this one up. I think I rotated the entire model. Yes, I did. And that added that rotation. So I'm going to hit that, delete. I'm going to re-add. Oh, if you're in the circle thing, I actually think it just automatically adds them. So I was being a dummy because I could have animated it in there. But I could also do that same thing in there. You could have animated it in there. But now I can like select the tail. And I'm going to move it like this. Then I'm going to go halfway. Move it like this. And I'm going to go back to here, hit Control C to copy that. Go all the way to 1, hit Control V and copy it. Now if I go back, uncheck the recording thing and hit play, now it's going to be playing that. So I've made a very basic one that only uses one tailbone. The one that I actually use goes down it. So I'd be clicking tail 2 and so far so forth to animate those. But that's just a basic one. Now that the animation is done, I can delete this extra one, go back to my original, uncheck that so it goes back, go to projects, the tutorial animation is now here, and I can preview it by dragging this to here. I don't know how well this is going to be seen, but if I hit play, you can see the animation works just fine down here. Just make sure that when you're going and adding it to your animation controller, I added mine to the FX, added a new layer, which as an example I'll show here is tail tutorial. I'll just name that one that. And then if you want to, you can drag and drop it or create, make an empty one, go here. You can type in the name. Now it's selected. I'll name it up here too. At the moment, it's the default one, so if I hit play, it would immediately, if I actually set the, see if this one's weight is now 0, and I think if I hit play here, yeah, it's just going to be automatically doing it, which obviously you wouldn't, you might want that, you might not. If that's all you want, there you go. But for me, you got to make sure that the weight is 1, because it will play in here with the weight 0, but it will not in fact work in VRChat. And I recommend making a mask to use, which you can. I made a mask for my tail, which for me it was as simple as going to. I made a mask folder under mine. I have the folder Cougar, made one masks. Right click, create avatar mask. Make one called tutorial, and then it opens up on here because I'm using an inhuman bone of the tail. These are all human bones. I don't want any of these, so deselected. Apparently, if I select enough of those things or uncheck the IKs, it unchecks all of them. I'm going to select my avatar, import its skeleton, toggle all because I don't want all. Go to the armature because that's where my tail bones are. Open up all my tails, and then select all of them. And now this is a mask with only the tail bones, meaning only the tail bones are going to be allowed. So then I could go back to the animation controller, the FX layer, the tail tutorial, and I could mask it. And then I can select the tutorial one, and now it won't do anything that is not in the mask, which is good because if you wanted to, such as what mine did, I have a tail default, but it just defaults all human bone or inhuman bones. And I use the mask on the tail, so that way it only does the tail part of it. So that way I could use the same animation for both the ears and the tail, but it only acts on that part. And that's, I think, the basics of how everything went, other than trying to set something up, such as like if you wanted a simple thing to have it go back and forth, like I did. What I did is I added a default one, which is an animation where I copied just the tail not doing anything, and the ears not doing anything, made that the default, and I made it so for the action-based layer, I made it so the part for the tail that's in the action layer, which is activated by the same thing that activates in the action layer, because if I didn't have this in the action layer, it would not animate the tail or the ears, so I had to add that separate, but I made my tail wag a toggle. And then if I go to the action layer, you can see that I added the suggestive stance here, and it uses the same trigger, which you could probably watch a other tutorial on the triggers, but that's simply a combination of adding conditions and parameters, that you probably need in both the menu and in here. And then you can set the transitions using like make transition, clicking on something, and you can open them up, add a condition if you want, stuff like that. A little bit more stuff to it, but that's, I believe, all the basics you would need. If I missed anything, I'll try and edit something after this, or I'll probably maybe list something in the description, but hopefully this will help you if you had a problem similar to mine. It took me a long time to figure out that I had to make a separate spot for it in the FX. I kept trying to do it in the gesture and additional and stuff like that. Didn't work, so I had to do it in here, and yeah. So that should work. Just to help prove, I'm even gonna have it so that the mouth moves here. Though it opens a little bit more than I was expecting. Might have to mess with that. But just to prove that it works, I am pulling the model. Man, that mouth moves a lot more than I expected. In VRChat, where I have all my things, such as I can make the tail wag, and it will now passively wag. And then one of the other things that I can do is I can cut it back off because I made it a toggle. The stance, as you can see, still works even here, which is pretty cool. And with the way that I have set up, since only one thing controls the tail at a time, if I have the tail wagging, I can then go to the custom emotes, go into here, and I have it so it overrides the tail wagging for this stance. So that way it goes back afterwards, but it does not prevent it.